We are almost at the end of March now, and the new iPad Pros are still nowhere to be seen. So what is happening? Are we still getting a new iPad Pro this month? And what about the 12.9-inch iPad Air? Here's everything that we know. The iPads are not here, but our new paper-cut peaks pack for wallpapers is. We've got 10 beautiful designs that you can pick from, all being in full 8K, so that you can use them on your iPhone, iPad, and Mac too. All over 60 plus packs are 8K and handcrafted by our talented designers. And you can find our app wallpapers on iOS and Android. Okay, so first of all, are we still getting some new iPads in March? Well, there's still not going to be any event in March, but unlike the new M3 MacBook Air, which Apple announced via press release, I do expect them to have some sort of promotional video for these new iPad Pros. After all, they are the biggest change since the 2018 model, and Mark Gurman also referred to Apple preparing some online videos and marketing campaigns in his report. Now, when it comes to whether or not we'll see them by the end of March, I think this is quite unlikely at this point, and here's why. In his latest Forum newsletter, Mark Gurman gave us some more info as to what is happening with these iPads behind the scenes. Apparently, Apple wants to ship these iPads with a specific version of iPadOS 17.4. However, that won't be completed until the end of March. And once it is completed, Apple will need to send it to their factories for them to install it on the iPads before they can even be shipped. So I think that based on this, the shipping date will most likely be mid to end of April. But what about the announcement date? Well, a Weibo leaker claims that Amazon has a number of 2024 iPad Air and iPad Pro cases, which will be put on the shelves starting from March the 26th, which would of course indicate that we should also see an announcement from Apple this coming Tuesday. And Chinese tech website IT Home claims the same thing, even posting some images of these Amazon listings. Ross Young, who most of you already probably know by now, he's a well-known display analyst, he seems to believe the same, that we should see these new iPads announced in either late March or even early April, with availability to only be in April. But when everyone got their hopes high for a Tuesday announcement, Mark Gurman came out and said that no, we won't be seeing any iPad announcements on March the 26th at all, which is very disappointing. This means that we might have to wait another, who knows, maybe even another month for these new iPads. Now, I mentioned that we've also had some fresh new leaks on these new iPads, and the first one comes from Weibo leaker Instant Digital. He claims that these new iPad Pros will be offered in a matte glass option in addition to the existing glossy option, and personally, I don't know how I feel about this. You see, Apple has already offered that nanotexture coating for the Studio Display as well as for the Pro Display XDR. I've seen that nanotexture glass in person at the Apple stores, and it looks bad, like really bad. That crystal clear retina sharpness is gone, and instead, we have this grainy look very similar to what you see from other third-party monitors. I know some people are fans of matte coatings, probably some of you are, but personally, I am not. I much prefer having the sharpness of a Retina display. Also, with the iPad Pros, you can already buy something like Paperlike and get a matte coating that way. Plus, Paperlike also gives you that resistance on the display, which makes writing or drawing much easier. So if you are an artist and you want to get the exact same texture for the new iPad Pro, Apple's glass won't offer you that. You'll still need to buy something like Paperlike. Which means that if you've already bought a nanotexture display, you'll now get a double matte coating, which won't look great at all. Besides, I'm fairly certain that this option will be very expensive too. On a Studio Display, this is a $300 upgrade, or downgrade to my eyes, while on the Pro Display XDR, you have to pay $1,000 more. And my guess is that this new glass will be a $200 upgrade. Now, if by some miracle Apple ends up using a similar matte coating to what Samsung does on the S24 Ultra, which significantly reduces reflections without adding grain, then this will indeed be amazing. In fact, the iPhone 17 next year is rumored to have such a display. So clearly Apple is looking into this. Although I don't see them adding this to the iPad Pro, as otherwise they would just have one option, which would be this standard option, rather than having a premium one too. Now, we do have a couple of more display news. It's been reported before that Apple has ordered 8.5 million OLED displays for this new iPad Pro generation, with Samsung supplying the 11-inch panels and LG supplying the 13-inch iPad Pro panels. However, Russ Young claims in his latest report that Samsung and LG will be actually splitting orders for the 11-inch model in the end, as Samsung is just not able to keep up with the production demands. And from the looks of it, both will also be supplying the 13-inch model too, with the 13-inch having 32% more orders than the 11-inch. Other sources reporting on this split claim that out of the 8.5 million order that Apple has made, 4 million units are for the 11-inch and 4.5 million are for the 13-inch. So Apple is definitely expecting the 13-inch model to sell more, which means that maybe its retail price won't actually be that high. And another new display leak that comes from leaker Instant Digital claims that the bezels of these new iPads will be 7.12mm thin on the 11-inch iPad Pro and 7.08mm thin on the 12.9-inch iPad Pro. The 11 and the 12.9-inch right now have 8mm bezels. That means that the new 2024 models have around 10% thinner bezels than the 2018 and onwards designs. We've already made them thinner in our concept, but not necessarily to a specific amount. It was simply just what looked realistic to our eyes. If they are to be this thin, then this is what you could expect to see on both models. Not a massive decrease in bezel thickness, but hey, at least they look a bit more modern now. Another fresh leak comes from Instant Digital once again, and he claims that both the iPad Pro and the iPad Air will feature the new landscape camera. Of course, we've heard about this happening on the iPad Pro before, but this is the first time we're hearing about it happening on the iPad Air as well. And this does make a lot of sense. As you probably know by now, the 10th gen iPad has already switched to a landscape orientation camera, which is far better for video calls when you're using the keyboard, and if the iPad Pro is switching too, it makes sense for the iPad Air to be switching as well. I'm not really sure about the iPad mini if that's switching too, as Apple does not sell a keyboard for the mini, plus it's also a much smaller device, so maybe that will remain with a portrait camera, although the next mini is not set to launch until September or even October. And leaker Instant Digital also reports that the 2024 iPad Air has now started shipping from China in the two sizes that we've heard rumored before. The 10.9-inch size and the new 12.9-inch, which would serve as a more affordable alternative to the new 13-inch iPad Pro for people who want a large screen iPad but do not want to spend loads of money for an iPad Pro. So a similar approach to what Apple has done with a 15-inch MacBook Air. Okay, so what are my final thoughts on these new iPads here? Well, I'm gonna start with the iPad Air. I think that the 10.9-inch M2 model is going to be quite underwhelming. The jump from the M1 to the M2 chip was quite small in the MacBooks, and aside from the landscape camera, we're not really getting anything else. Now, the 12.9-inch model, that's the one that I think will sell very well. Since the current iPad Air starts from $600, I think it is pretty fair to assume that this new 12.9-inch would start from around $800. And for that money, I think that this will be a steal, especially once the refurbished models start appearing, which should drop the price to just over $600. Now, when it comes to the iPad Pros, I am honestly quite excited. Although, I don't think that I will be upgrading from my 2018 11-inch, as I'm not really an iPad person. I mostly use it as an external screen for my Mac when I'm traveling. Other than that, it's mostly gathering dust. But I'm still excited to see something new. Like, I'm curious to see what sort of design changes Apple ends up making. Of course, the dimensions got leaked, which I've talked about in the previous video, and the thickness is going to be considerably reduced. And I'm also curious to see how bright these new displays will be. Will they be able to match the mini LED displays on the MacBook Pros? And if so, that will be very impressive for an OLED display. Of course, I'm also curious to see the new updated Magic Keyboard. I'm definitely going to get a 13-inch model with that Magic Keyboard to test and use. I don't think that I will ever end up picking that over my M3 MacBook Air for traveling, but let's see. So yeah, I would love to hear your thoughts, and if you do plan on upgrading from your current iPad to any of these new models. We'll have videos on them as soon as Apple announces them, so make sure that you subscribe to the channel. I'm Daniel, this is ZONEofTECH, and I'll see you guys in the next one. ZONEofTECH, signing out. Cheers.